Thank you for staying with us this hour. You are watching In Time TV's On the Edge. I'm Dr. Jonas Moses. With me this hour, Dr. Janet Hayes and Dr. Joan Flanders. We are talking this hour about topics in cardiology, imaging techniques, and we're looking at the differences between invasive and non-invasive cardiology. We're also talking, hopefully this time around, about the difference between invasive and interventional cardiology. I did want to ask, I will throw into the mix that I have been looking at a technology about which I know very little, and I thought I would throw you a curveball and ask you to discuss this with me. If you're familiar with it, great. If you're not, great, because maybe you can help me take a look at it objectively. The device and the software around it, apparently, they're looking at impedance cardiography. And as I understand it, this is useful in heart failure and some other similar issues. From what I gather, while cardiologists certainly would find a benefit from this, it frequently shows up in other internal medicine and family practice. I guess because for them it's a useful screening device. But you seem to know a little bit about it, Joan?
I'm familiar with the technology,
all right.
and I'm a very science-based person. So the first thing I always ask about any new technology is why is it valid? So bioimpedance takes advantage of the fact that your blood is flowing and it's full of charged particles. And just like MRI kind of works because your charged particles can be directed all in the same direction by a very powerful magnet, bioimpedance looks at the charged particles and the impedance of blood flow. And from that you can actually infer an awful lot. How fast the blood is flowing, the cardiac output based on how fast it is, and it's a mathematical manipulation of that. In the past, the only way you could really directly measure a person's cardiac output, or the so-called efficiency of their engine, the blood flow, is by sticking a little pulmonary catheter inside the heart and measuring the speed of they called it thermal dilution. You actually injected water, which is a different temperature than blood, and measured how fast that water would pass through the thermal catheter. And then you could calculate, based on heart rate, etc., the cardiac output. This technology, and I believe that the...
Let's see if we can hold this up here. What we're looking at, from what I understand, is, let's see, here, I'll let you hold that.
Sorry.
And maybe
so what we're looking at is just a report, and the trade name of this is BioZ. I don't know if
yeah, I think a company called Cardiodynamics. Yeah, we can talk about the companies, because I think it's valid to, if we're trying to get information, I don't know. Okay, so we'll hold it up over here.
Yes.
All right.
There we go. Is that better?
Oh, okay. Here, I'll hold it up over here. All right. So, from what I understand, what we're looking at is the impedance cardiograph piggybacked onto a regular ECG. Is that correct?
Paper, exactly. So the ECG, of course, is here, and then the impedance data, or the blood flow, is under it. Now, if you had a catheter in somebody's artery, you would get a picture that was very much like this. And basically, it's just a mathematical manipulation, and it then calculates cardiac output. Now, I will say that this is very controversial. In fact, most cardiologists do not like this technology because they take a little bit of liberty with the mathematical interpretation of things. However, you can infer at least cardiac output from that.
Okay.
Now, it's prone to...
Cardiac output is important.
Is important. Boy, that's I don't know how to explain that in lay terms.
Not necessary.
Not necessarily.
Peer-to-peer.
Okay, so heart rate times stroke volume.
Okay, yes, and I see that stroke index and cardiac index are mentioned up here. So go ahead
and go through that.
Yes, please.
So stroke volume, of course, is per cardiac cycle how much blood is being ejected out. and then it's related to cardiac output by simply multiplying it by how many cardiac cycles there are, or your heart rate. And that's an important measure because we know what's normal and we know what's not normal. If someone has heart failure, so if each stroke volume is lower volume because the efficiency of the engine is impaired, so let's say normal cardiac output or normal stroke volume, normal ejection fraction by echocardiogram is 55 to 65%. So if you have someone with heart failure, let's say it's just half of what's normal, so 30%.
Okay.
Obviously, you have to do something to keep up with metabolic demands. So you either increase your heart rate or you try to increase the stroke volume by dilating, and all of those things affect physiology. Heart rate, obviously, as you get faster, increases myocardial oxygen demand. So because it's such a delicate balance, all of these things are important.
Well, it appeals to me that wouldn't this then be useful in adjusting meds, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the point.
That's the point. It's kind of the footprint of what's going on. You can't just look at somebody and tell if their cardiac output has diminished. You can sort of imply it because if they get very short of breath or if they don't look, their color isn't good. But this is actually just another tool to measure.
And this, I'm not that familiar with this technique, but it looks like a non-invasive attempt to get at pressures that we in the past could only get invasively, and are very useful to adjust medicines properly for their best effect, particularly with heart failure.
Yes.
Well, given the fact that I'm considering, a show where I talk about this technology, it's useful to have some feedback from folks who might use it. Have you used this at all?
I was in a practice that did use this. It's funny, depending on how well reimbursed, there are a lot of issues that go into why somebody chooses to buy a piece of equipment. In my mind, in that practice, I had the tools that I needed. I had an echocardiogram machine and physical examination.
We're going to go to a commercial break. Please stay with us. You're watching In Time TV's On the Edge. I'm Dr. Jonas Moses. This hour with me, Dr. Janet Hayes and Dr. Joan Flanders. We'll be right back.